I want to come back to this similarity or relationship between the work of phenomenologically informed writers like Bachelard and the writing of it comes out of cognitive linguistics like George Lakoff and Mark Turner. As I've already said, there seems to be some similarities to do with I guess the sort of structure of each of those projects. Both projects involve taking some aspect of our poetic or conceptual imagination and then excavating its origins within metaphor, I suppose, or tracing how metaphors play out in our imaginations. As I've already said, there are quite clear distinctions in terms of the writing style, and indeed probably to the constituency to whom they're addressed. There's also a distinction, I think, in the intellectual underpinnings to each of those projects. More recent work by the cognitive linguist school, as well thought, would ground their practice well, initially in a model of psychology based on the embodied mind, which in turn is confirmed, underpinned, supported by studies in neuroscience, in which, for example, areas of the brain which seem to, if not be responsible for metaphor, at least assist in the production of metaphor, and ultimately within evolutionary psychology, in which the logic of why we would have a brain that seems to do that is given an adaptive narrative. The writings of Bachelard, on the other hand, and others, obviously isn't underpinned by any of those things. So, to my knowledge, no such thing as evolutionary psychology, at least to the extent that we have it today, when Bachelard was writing, and to the extent that we did have it in the form of sociobiology. It was deeply unpopular and the subject of mistrust. And neuroscience was really in its infancy. We didn't have access to fMRI scanners or anything of that nature, so it wouldn't have been possible to support those ideas empirically with reference to brain science as it is to a certain extent now. So the origins for Bachelard's ideas and methodologies don't lie within those empirical sciences. They lie within philosophy, particularly phenomenology and existentialism. And there are traces of, or quite clear traces of Merleau-Ponty and Heidegger, maybe Kierkegaard, coming through the writings of Bachelard. Certainly talks a lot about the concept of sort of being in the world, or being cast into the world, which is very Heidegger, really, and very Merleau-Ponty. Taking the world as you find it, as it presents itself to you in a phenomenal way, is in a sense a precursor to the embodied cognition understanding of accessing the world via the contingencies of our embodiment, the sorts of senses we have and the sort of engagements we make. I think Merleau-Ponty said something like, the body is in the world as the heart is in the body. And that's very reminiscent of that mantra which goes through embodied cognition, which is this idea that the mind is embodied and the body is embedded. There's a similar sort of non-reducible relationship between mind, body and environment. And in Merleau-Ponty, that's not the hierarchical relationship. Mind, body and environment are mutually self-arising, sort of, in Merleau-Ponty. And that again is something which is supported within many of the ideas in modern neuroscience and modern evolutionary psychology. And here I'm thinking of people like Gibson, but also Vellman and well, a number of others who stress the coexistence of mind, body and world, not in the hierarchical relationship, but in an existence of mutual potentiation or mutual arising. It would be interesting to read a version of Lakoff's analysis of anger, written in the style of Bachelard. And in some ways that's kind of what I was attempting, really, or a blend at least between those styles of writing when I wrote about liquids. I was certainly trying to cite academic, phenomenological and poetic sources for those metaphors, those concepts. Rabindranath Tagore writing about diving into an ocean of forms, Aaron Gershwitz writing about absorption, Csikszentmihalyi writing about flow, and maybe even some of the stuff that comes out of neuroscience to do with re-entry loops. And of course, William James's use of liquid metaphors in streams of consciousness and the oceanic feeling of religious experiences. So I think there's some mileage in drawing parallels between a certain style of phenomenologically informed writing and a certain style of writing, more empirical sounding writing, informed by cognitive linguistics and embodied cognition. It's perhaps the two easiest comparisons to be made between Bachelard and George Lakoff.